Here, Stephen.
Councillor Gary Donnelly.
On shot.
Councillor Rory Farrell.
Here online.
Alderman Darren Guy.
Here, Stephen.
Councillor Sean Harkin. Councillor Conor Heaney has given his apologies. Councillor Patricia Logue. Councillor Joe McGowan.
On shot, Stephen.
Councillor Kieran Maguire. Alderman David Ramsey. And Councillor Lillian Sinai Barr. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Stephen. We're now going to do the broadcasting statement. I would like to remind everyone who is in attendance today that this meeting will be broadcast live via the Council's YouTube channel and will be available for viewing by the public and media. The broadcast will also be available for repeated viewing at a later date. This broadcast may be terminated or suspended in accordance with Council protocol. By participating in this meeting, you are consenting to being filmed and to the use and storage of those images for broadcasting and training purposes and for the purpose of keeping historical records and making those records available to the public. A copy of the Council's privacy notice may be found on the Council website, www.derrystrabane.com. So item number 5 on the agenda is Chairperson's business. I have got no Chairperson's business, so we'll just move straight now to the deputation, who we will receive from Ms. Sarah Longlands, who is from the Centre for Local Economic Strategies, Mr. Colin Jess and Ms. Amanda Johnson from Social Enterprise NI, and Mr. Brian O'Neill from Enterprise Northwest to discuss the issues relating to a council meeting or council motion, on a community wealth scheme. So you're all very, very welcome, and I'll hand it over to yourselves.
Thanks very much, and thanks for the invitation to come along to this afternoon's meeting. Would you like me to begin?
Yes, that's perfect. Yep, no problem.
Yeah, okay, great. I've got a presentation. Would it be okay for me to share my screen?
Yep, I'm sure someone in IT now will get that sorted for you to do that. Yep.
I think it looks like I can do it on here, but let me just see. Just bear with me a minute.
Problem.
Okay, so hopefully you can see my. Can you see my screen now?
Yep, we can see it here. Yep.
You can see a presentation, yeah. Okay, great. Well, as I say, thank you very much for the invitation to come along this afternoon. I'm Sarah Longlands, and I'm the Chief Executive of CLES. CLES is the Centre for Local Economic Strategies. And we are the leading UK organisation for community wealth building. We are a charity and we're also a social enterprise. We work across the UK and in Ireland, exploring the implementation of community wealth building. And we were set up in the 1980s very much as an organisation to try and think about how we enable local economies to work more effectively. And how not only we can think about it, but how we can actually do it in practice. And since the last financial crisis in 2008, 2009, we've been working with other organisations, both in the UK and in the States, particularly the Democracy Collaborative. Here in Northern Ireland, we've worked a lot with the Development Trust Northern Ireland, looking at how you can develop a different approach to economic development, which really builds from within and really starts to see wealth flowing into local economies. So I just wanted to give you a brief overview of how we see community wealth building and its application. So community wealth building is a peoples-based strategy for local economic development, which is about increasing the flow of wealth back into local economies. And the aim is to build wealth from within so that it's not simply extracted, but redirect it into communities and has real impacts on people's lives. So, for example, a greater diversity of economic ownership, decent work, training and progression, more small SME growth, startups, cooperatives, worker ownership, and social enterprise. And what we're talking about in terms of outcomes is a more inclusive economy, an economy which is generative as opposed to simply extractive, and where people actually see the benefits of growth and investment in their own on their own doorstep and in their back pocket. And we believe that this is really important because there has been, I think, an assumption over the last 10, 20 years that as long as you can grow your economy, then people will benefit. As long as you can get the investment from wherever, if you like, into an area, then automatically people will see an improvement in their livelihoods. But as consistent analysis has shown, there isn't necessarily an automatic relationship between economic growth and human welfare. You don't necessarily see an improvement in people's lives just because the overall growth of your economy is moving in a positive direction. You have to do something much more deliberately to connect people to the economic opportunities, whether that's in terms of higher wages, jobs, or improvements in neighbourhoods. You have to intervene deliberately to make sure that those benefits actually flow down into people's communities. And you don't want it just to be simply a trickle, you want it to be a flow so that people start to really see the benefits in their own lives and those of their children and families. So that's where community wealth building comes in. It's really about an alternative to that trickle down and think about how you really start to build from within and build very much on the assets and strengths that already exist in place. And we explore this in 5 different ways. This tends to be a way of thinking about community wealth building. And we talk about these as levers for change, or sometimes they're called principles or pillars. So I'll just talk briefly through these 5 levers for change before then giving you some examples of where this has been done in other parts of the world and in the UK. So the first one is around finance. So finance is often seen as one of the most remote, one of the most extractive forms of economic activity in our area, in our economy. But community wealth building argues that you can ensure that finance flows directly into local places and that it actually works for local people. It doesn't necessarily have to be simply money flowing into absentee landlords or into shareholders that have no connection for place. It can actually be financial arrangements which have a much more closer relationship with place. So, for example, credit unions is can be a way of making sure that the money stays within an area. And there's also been a lot of work on municipal finance. So local authorities, other public sector organisations having a more direct stake in financial arrangements so that you ensure that investment actually comes back to benefit local places. So that's the first one around finance. Second is around workforce. So again, this is about thinking about how do you put your own house in order? How do you ensure that you as an employer, whether you're in the public sector or the private sector, do all you can to increase fair work and the development of local labour markets? And there has been a lot of discussion about this in Northern Ireland recently because of the kind of high-profile campaign around the living wage campaign. And so I think that is one way in which you can make a real impact on this. But there's also been work done in other parts of the UK and indeed wider Europe, looking at other measures to improve workforce development. So, for example, if you are advertising as a public sector organisation, how do you ensure that those opportunities are available to everyone in an area, particularly those areas that have the highest disadvantage? So plenty to do on workforce. Thirdly, around spending. So this is about how you maximise the community or the community benefits, as it's called in Scotland, or the social value is another way of describing it, through the procurement and commissioning process. So the services and goods that public sector organisations buy, how do you make sure that you are you're actually buying wider benefits in terms of economic, environmental and social outcomes? And that process starts way before the procurement stage. It starts in the design of services and in thinking about what an organisation really wants to get out of a contract. So that's a really important and powerful mechanism for delivering benefits and ensuring that benefits are flowing into local areas. Fourthly, around land and property. Again, how do you kind of really maximise the value that local communities can receive from land and property assets, including those held by the public sector, and a really important role there around housing and land. And then finally, inclusive ownership. Inclusive ownership really underpins a lot of this. How do you make sure that we have a diversity of ownership across an area, so that there are lots of different pathways by which people can play a role in their economy? That might be through traditional small business development. It might be through social enterprises or mutuals and cooperatives. It might be through employee ownership, and that can often be a really important route for business succession, for example. So in business succession, instead of people retiring and the business disappearing or being bought up by much larger organisations, thinking about employee ownership as a way to ensure that the benefits of that business remain within a particular area. So those are the kind of 5 different ways in which we tend to think about community wealth building, and those things are very much connected to one another. They don't stand on their own. They very much kind of work together to create a good economy. And just some examples of where this has happened elsewhere. So one of the most cited examples of this is in Cleveland and in the US, where the Democracy Collaborative have led on a lot of this work on community wealth building. In this area, they had a combined wealth of around £3 billion in the city's institutions, and they realised that very little of that was impacting on the citizens of the city's poorest neighbourhoods. So they created a strategy to try and capture as much of that money and drive it locally for community benefit. And that included the setting up of 3 community-owned cooperatives, which delivered some of the really kind of foundational economy services. So they had the Evergreen Energy Solutions, which was renewables. They had the Green City Growers, which produced food to sell in the city's hospitals and in hospitality businesses. And they had the Evergreen Cooperative Laundry, which did all of the laundry for local health and social care providers, but also some of the city's hotels and other hospitality businesses. So that's the example from the US. The Scottish Government have done a huge amount on community wealth building, and they've seen it as a means to deliver on their objective of a well-being economy. They now have a government minister for community wealth, Tom Arthur. They're planning a Community Wealth Building Act in 2023, and they've also piloted 5 community wealth building councils, which are all taking forward different action plans for community wealth building. And that's included a range of different areas, so cities, but also rural areas and even some of the Scottish islands. So real kind of energy and excitement around the potential of community wealth building in Scotland, and a lot of good examples to draw upon. Preston's another one of the kind of poster children of, if you like, of community wealth building. And in Preston, their story was, they're a small city, about 100,000 population. They were doing a deal at the time of the financial crash with a big investor for a new shopping centre. And at the last minute, the private sector partner pulled out of the deal because of the financial crisis. And the council had to take a step back and think, well, what are we doing trying to get this inward investment? Well, we know we are always on the losing hand in these negotiations. What else could we be doing that perhaps we're not, that could still have a really important impact on the lives of the people who live here? So they started to use procurement to try and drive economic and social benefits. And those are some of the outcomes that they've had from that process. So, 70 million pounds more for the city economy, 1,600 more jobs and 4,000 more people being paid the real living wage. And they've also explored how they might be able to use their pension funds to invest in the local area. They're looking at how they can become first customers for food and tech cooperatives. And at the minute, they are building a new recreation and cinema in the city, which they hope will be a cooperative model of ownership. So they've also, I mean, it's hard to be, to attribute cause and effect always, but they have moved up significantly in the deprivation index and have been described as one of the most improved places to live in the UK. So Preston, very much one of the kind of first examples of doing community wealth building. And we've been working with Preston since they began their process. And we've also been working with Manchester as well. Have also been looking at how they could use their own economic impact, if you like, in terms of spending and recruitment to really make an impact on their communities. And then another, a final example, really, just again to give you the kind of contrast, really, that this can work in large cities. So we've done a lot of work in Birmingham, for example, but it can also work in much smaller areas. So this is an example of Lewis District Council in Sussex. It's got a population of about 100,000, largely rural, with a number of small towns, and they've focused on how they can use their advantages to kind of build and strengthen the local economy through business growth and local job creation. So they own their own council housing stock. They're working with other councils across the area who also own housing, and they're using that to work with local businesses to build green construction skills in partnership with the local college, to work with local councils on the same theme. And how they could really release the potential of green jobs in their area, particularly around renewable energies and a community bank. So that's another example of where that's taking place as well. And as I mentioned, we've also been working in Birmingham, which is a much bigger city region, looking at how the city council can work alongside the hospital, the university, and some of their smaller housing associations to look at how they can really pool their economic impact, if you like, in terms of the investment they're putting in terms of the jobs that they've got, to really create impact at scale. And really kind of coordinating their activity in a meaningful way so as to create a much bigger impact for people in that area. One of the projects they've done is a project called ICANN, which has basically ripped up the rule book in terms of recruitment. And they are now targeting recruitment for new opportunities in their hospital and in the city council in the city's most disadvantaged wards. So instead of having to fill out a big application form for jobs there, what they've done there is simply say, go into those communities, talk to people on an informal basis, find out what they're interested in, and then match them to the jobs that become available. And that has been hugely successful to the point now that they are completely oversubscribed with lots of people wanting to get involved. And it's been really important for them in terms of equality and diversity too. So that's just some examples from the work at CLES. There's lots more information on the website. I've just put some of the links there, including some of the work we've done in Northern Ireland. Hope that's been useful. I'm really happy to take any questions or comments anyone has. So thanks very much for that. I'll pass on to the others.
Mr. Chairman, are you looking for my presentation or do you want to take questions first?
No, we can move on, Colin, if we like, yep. And then we can take the questions at the end.
Okay, I have a presentation here as well, which hopefully my IT skills are sufficient that it... Can you see that?
Yep, I can see it clearly, yep.
First of all, good afternoon. And on behalf of Amanda and myself, thank you for the invitation to be here today to talk about our work in social enterprise Northern Ireland and how we interact around in the country, and also a focus on how we work with local councils. So thank you very much for that invitation. Social Enterprise Northern Ireland is the representative body for the social enterprise sector. We are a membership body with around about 400 members, and we help to raise awareness of the business model. We help to give our members an opportunity and social enterprises an opportunity of getting on supply chains. And social enterprise is a business model that is inclusive and supports local communities. One of the recent surveys showed that over 50% of employees are based in the local area to the social enterprise. So we believe that it's a great business model. We believe it's actually a business model that every business should be following and trying to support its local community. So we were established in 2012. This is our 10th anniversary, and we will have some celebratory events this year, which we're very keen to advertise and profile, just to raise again the awareness of the sector. To give you some sort of size, the 2019 report showed a significant growth in organisations from 2013, and in organisations and also in the number of employees. We believe a turnover of just shy of £1 billion is significant in the Northern Ireland economy, contributing 625 million. And we believe that the social enterprise as a business model is gaining more and more traction with all sectors, private, public, and educational sectors. It's a business model that young people are very engaged with, that want to see what organisations do to support their local communities rather than issuing shares to or dividends to shareholders. The only difference in a social enterprise and an SME, as you would know it, would be what they do with their profits, and that a social enterprise will reinvest for their social mission rather than rewarding their shareholders with dividends. So, as I say, 50% of employees are from around the immediate locality. Another thing about it is, as well, is that 43% of social enterprises showed that were led by women, which is round about what's the same in England, Scotland, and Wales, whereas the SME sector, I believe, is somewhere around 19 or 20%. So we're paying just over 581 million in wages. So again, we think it's a reasonable, significant contributor to the Northern Ireland economy. And going back to the previous programme for government, the social enterprise sector was placed very well to deliver on those outcomes. And the idea of delivering social value is something that Sarah has already mentioned, and it's something that we're very involved with through, and we'll touch on that shortly as well, around the public sector in Northern Ireland spend just under £3 billion. And you'd imagine if we were able to get social value applied to that three right across the board, it would be an amazing impact on local communities. So I wanted just to touch a wee bit on our local government engagement. All 11 councils or local authorities are members of Social Enterprise Northern Ireland. We value that relationship. It's something that we have worked on over several years, and we meet on a quarterly basis with councils, and we discuss what we're doing as a sector to provide a consistent message, but also to hear as well. It's a two-way flow from the councils and what they're doing in their own area. And I know Danielle McNally from Derry City and Strabane has taken over that role from Louise recently. So we look forward to welcoming Danielle at our next meeting towards the end of June. We also present regularly to the likes of NAC, the National Association of Councillors, and also NILGA, where we have a very good relationship with them on several programmes. So how do we want to engage with local councils? We're very keen that local councils will engage with and also signpost any social enterprises to ourselves from the point of view of membership. We are a membership body, and if someone is setting up a social enterprise, we give them free membership to get up and running and support them through our programs that we're running, and support them through we have private sector members who would give pro bono support to us as well, around setting up legal costs or giving a free half-hour session to an organisation that they want to set up a company. So a lot of the private sector, there's an insurance company as well, would give them discounted rates. So a lot of those members, through being part of a representative body, will be able to benefit. We have a social enterprise day normally later on in the year, and we're very keen that each local council supports that. on that day. We're asking them also to remain a corporate member of Social Enterprise Northern Ireland, and also to promote Social Enterprise Northern Ireland locally through any economic events that they're running. We have a category in our Social Enterprise Awards for the Council of the Year, and it's a very highly competitive. And I think Derry City and Strabane a couple of years ago I think they were very strong runners up, I think, from memory on that category because of the work that they do. That's a reflection of how the judges, not ourselves, we don't act as judges, but how an independent panel of judges would look at the work that the council does. One of the big tasks we've been given this year is from the Department for Economy, who have tasked us to create a database to include all social enterprises across Northern Ireland. And that's an ongoing piece of work. We're sitting at the moment around about 800 on that, and we think there's more that need to be added onto it, but that's an ongoing piece of work. And that database will be used by private sector and public sector organisations when they're looking at procuring and tendering for contracts as to what they do in each particular area. There will be a facility on that to drop down into Derry City and Strabane and list all the social enterprises that are based in Derry City and Strabane, or you can drop down list and find out all of those are involved in healthcare or childcare or working with offenders. So it's we hope to have that ready by the end of June. And the one thing there is we've asked them to agree, and they've accepted this as Social Enterprise Champion. I mentioned Danielle there. Danielle is the Social Enterprise Champion within your council and represents your council alongside another 10 other members. So that's an important avenue for us to work with local councils, a relationship that we value very much. So going forward, we have already started work on the Social Enterprise National Strategy for Northern Ireland. One of the things that the social enterprise sector suffered from during COVID was the lack of the awareness. We're looking for a cross-departmental, cross-party support for a national strategy, and that work is ongoing at the moment, and we're glad to say that work has started and will be coming down the tracks this year. One of the things I found out when I took part in a written and oral evidence at Westminster earlier on this year was that Scotland and Wales were very well supported. The social enterprise sector in Scotland and Wales were extremely well supported during COVID. England and Northern Ireland weren't. And one of the outcomes of that was that we didn't have that national strategy, which had cross-departmental and cross-party support, that people understood the business model. We lobbied for 7 months before we got any support for the sector. We're delighted to say we did. But I think a national strategy, which we're delighted to say is kicked off, and working with the Department for Economy on that. The database we've spoken to you about, young people understand social enterprise more now, and they really want to work for organisations that are socially minded. And we've appointed a young ambassador for the sector. We've also set up a young persons panel to challenge us in our thinking and make sure that young people's voices are heard. And ultimately, we'll love to see social enterprise taught in business studies in school, being part of the curriculum. More and more, we're hearing that it is being mentioned, but we would love to see it come through from the examination bodies to make sure that it is on the curriculum. And we have had meetings with PermSec within the Department of Education on that regard. The social value within procurement, as Sarah's alluded to as well, one of my roles is as a member of the procurement board. Conor Murphy invited me to join that as a sectoral representative, and that's been very important in giving the voice of the sector alongside the likes of the construction sector and the manufacturing sector around social value. There were, I'll come to it just in the next slide, but we have pushed very hard for PPN, public procurement notes, to be signed off at the executive level. The procurement board reports directly to the executive, which is another step forward, and rather than going through PermSec. So that's been important for us. The Transformational Academy, Sarah alluded to the fact about it's not just about procurement, it's right at the start of the process. And we are working with Ulster University on the Transformational Academy with the workshops to be arranged and starting in a couple of months' time with senior officials through the government departments for them to understand once it gets to procurement, it's a tick box exercise around what's the cheapest, really. What we want to do is drive economic recovery and to make sure that organisations, when they're looking for what's the best procurement route, that they consider all options, which procurement is only one. And obviously to increase the supply chain opportunities. So when organisations are looking to buy products, goods and services. We're encouraging private sector and public sector to look at social enterprises, because the profits of social enterprises are reinvested into helping those, in many cases, less well-off in society, into employment. And there's some great examples of that as well. So getting on the supply chains of private and public sector. I mentioned the procurement developments in Northern Ireland in the PPN, public procurement note. From next week, actually, in the 1st of June, public sector will be required to have 10% of scoring allocated towards social value, with a commitment to move it next year, depending on review, to 20%. So there's been a lot of conversations we're having around private sector organisations and public sector organisations. More and more people looking at how they can bring social enterprises onto supply chains. How can they actually make their organisation fit for purpose by working and supporting social enterprise and social value locally? It's a business model which is growing, and it's a great opportunity to actually embrace social enterprise within the council areas as well. The PPN 0221 is reserved contracts, where contracts can be reserved for organisations that are working with 30% of their staff have a disadvantage of some sort, be that a disability or be that ex-offenders or homeless. But the issue there is that it hasn't been widely used in Northern Ireland, and there's still some reticence to use that. So the PPN 0221 is trying to drive that forward, and again that creates great opportunities. So the PPNs, however, don't apply to councils. That's only central government departments. Councils aren't. But I have to say, through Solus, where we presented to, there is an interest in what's going on, and I do know that some chief executives sit on a procurement group within CPD and understand what's happening, and which is encouraging as well, that this will start roll out down to council level. So the understanding of social value, both from outside the social enterprise sector and I have to say from within the sector, is something that we need to drive as well. I've mentioned the Transformation Academy, the need for upskilling all the Northern Ireland Civil Service commissioning staff, and I've also mentioned the Transformation Academy, which will be rolled out in a couple of months' time as well. So Brian O'Neill's on the call, and whilst I'm giving you a macro view of what's happening from the sector across Northern Ireland and beyond, I thought it was useful to have some local examples. And I think, Brian, if you're able to jump on and just discuss some of the work that these organisations carry out, would be useful.
Yeah, thank you, Colin. And afternoon, everyone. And I'm delighted to be able to be part of the Social Enterprise NI presentation, and also the wider community wealth building presentation with Sarah, because it is an area that we have a real interest in. And these are just to contextualise some of the stuff that Colin's talking about, some local examples that work across the Derry City and Strand District Council area. These are all organisations that you may or may not know. Sometimes people kind of see it as maybe a charity, but they do have significant trading activity, and they're organisations of significant scale. And I suppose the sector across Derry City and Strand District Council is well recognised for its activism, its social enterprise, and it's very much self-start. And I suppose outsiders look at us enviously in terms of the type of organisations that we have. And some of these local examples, though, in Culturland there, that's one of the leading Irish language and cultural organisations. They deliver a range of different cultural activities, festivals, events, programmes, but they also have significant assets which they manage, and they're looking to develop further. They employ between 30 and 40 staff. We have the Nerve Centre there, a significant asset that works across Derry and Belfast, with its headquarters based in Derry. Employing over 50 staff, and it's well recognised that they're the leading creative agency across NI, and a market leader in that space. We have health organisations. We have Leafair Wellbeing Village that manage that asset on behalf of Derry City Council. We have OLT, the Healthy Living Centre, and they're providing lots and lots of healthy health and wellbeing initiatives across the city and wider afield. And we know there's one as well in terms of the Bogside and Brandywell Health Forum, leading up a social prescribing model that grows across NI and the Scotland, and they're the organisation that has developed up that concept and is leading that from the city. Ourselves, we're 35 years next year. We're a social enterprise. We manage in the space for startup organisations and FDA organisations, about 70,000 square foot of space. And we probably have a tenant base of probably 100 businesses with maybe 250 members of staff. So we've delivered a range of social enterprise programs across Northern Ireland for the last 15 years from Vestany, Dare City Council. So we're embedded in the community, but we're also delivering a very specialised service to organisations like Infanti, as well as others that are looking to explore that. So there's a real willingness across the city and across the district in terms of the model. It's just about supporting it further, and some of the things that Sarah's talking about and Colin's talking about are things that I suppose is what we're kind of asking of council, is that it's a business model that we're fully behind, because we see the benefits, not only economic benefits, but also the social benefits that some of these organisations can provide and have been providing over a number of years.
Thanks very much, Brian. I just got a couple more slides here just to wrap this up, but I think it's for all. I always find it useful. If we give I can give the sort of macro feeling of what's going on out there as a sector, but actually seeing names that you will recognise and the work that they do. And as Brian says, there's some real exemplars up in Derry City and Strabane area of social enterprise, and to give them further support and to drive that forward would mean so much in creating jobs. And it is a fine balance between financial return and social impact, and that's always been the challenge of the sector. But some of the work and some of the outcomes of what these organisations do, it's fantastic. So going forward, we just looked. Although we've got the PPNs, we're still driving for a social value act for Northern Ireland. The strategy we've mentioned about the Transformation Academy, young people through the Young Persons Panel and our Young Ambassador. Trying to get social enterprises included into not only council supply chain, but other organisations' supply chain. Using the social enterprise champions to run regional events for us as well. And also Entrepreneurship Week. I think it's a great opportunity to, obviously within each individual area, there is a focus on entrepreneurship in that council area. But I just encourage you to consider more use of promotion of social enterprise as a business model through that. And because there is a huge benefit to individuals, not only in the people themselves, but to their families. There are people employed with the social enterprise sector who would struggle probably to find employment elsewhere if it wasn't for social enterprise, and the impact that has on them, the impact it has on their families, but also the impact it has on the public purse, and that giving those people into employment, giving them a job that pay tax and pay insurance is it's a big step forward as well. And so sector we feel that's definitely worth supporting. So that's all I have to say, Chairman. Those are our contact details. You'll find us on all social media platforms and our website as well. So happy to take any questions.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much for all them detailed presentations. I'll now open up the floor for any members that would like to ask any questions. If you'd like to put your name in the chat box, we can get them wrote down in order. Councillor Donnelly.
Hello, and thank you for the presentation. Probably one of the biggest social enterprises or organisation in the area where I live and represent, Craigan, is Rathmore Enterprises, and I didn't see it mentioned on the screen there. I have been having some technical difficulties, so I have to say that I didn't hear the full presentation. But one of the problems that we do have in Derry and Strabane, particularly the Moor Ward, is that there's a section of the community that believes that there's a problem with gatekeeping, and therefore a lot of benefits don't come down to certain sections of the community. Have you looked into this in any detail, or have any ideas on how we get around that? Thank you.
We haven't, as a body, come across anything locally. You actually mentioned there, the work over the years that Colin McFeely has done at Rathmore. I don't think we didn't leave that out on purpose. I was just giving you some other examples maybe you weren't too familiar with, but we haven't come across anything as a governing body that'll be aware of that, Gary, unless anybody locally has come across that. Brian, have you heard anything in that regard?
I haven't heard that, Gary, either.
think my comment, I mean, I don't know the specific example you're speaking about, but I think my thought on that from what I've seen elsewhere is I know that that can be an issue, but it kind of comes down to your governance really, and how to ensure your kind of governance of an organisation, how you can use that to ensure the benefits do go more widely, and that gatekeeping doesn't occur. That would be my thought on it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Logue.
Thank you, Chair, and I just want to thank Brian, Sarah and Colin for your presentations. They were excellent and very, very interesting. I do want to note that 3 of the 3 of the social enterprises are in my DA, and do know of the very good work that they do. The models that you provided and showed, the Preston model, the Scotland within our council districts and the councils within the UK, they're very, very different in what they provide, and such as we don't have no responsibility for housing, for the welfare of children and young people, etc. Per se, and another thing that I would be concerned about would be, given the education authority, how is that if they went under this social enterprise model, how would the wealth be shared amongst all the council districts equally? And I suppose that would go for the health authorities as well. But look, very, very interesting, and I would certainly like to, look into it more. But if you could maybe talk a wee bit about that, how a certain public body could share the wealth equally, if their main base is in another council district. Thank you.
Shall I take that one and then
Yeah.
if I go first? So thanks for that question, Patricia. I think it's a really important point that you've raised there, and I appreciate the fact that the examples I gave aren't necessarily completely applicable in all contexts, and I think that is one of the aspects of community wealth building, in that there's a lot of discussion about the Preston model, or what's happened in the States or elsewhere, and these are not sort of easily transferable models. You've got to we can take inspiration from them, but every area will be different and every context will be different. So it's really important that you tailor the approach to meet the specific needs and challenges and opportunities of your own area. On the public bodies bit, I think there's and I think it applies to councils as well. I think sometimes it's really just about raising awareness of the fact that when you're spending public money, it isn't just about what services you're providing on the ground. It's also about how you spend that money and how you use that money in the most imaginative way to try and deliver wider social, economic and environmental outcomes. And I think sometimes it's just bringing the discussion on the spending together with the kind of vision that you have for place. So for example, something I mentioned, one of the sort of 5 areas that you might want to look at is recruitment. And I think recruitment is one of those universal things. Every public body will recruit, regardless of whether they're a regional organisation or whether they're a local organisation. And there are really simple things that organisations can do in how they recruit staff to their organisation to make sure that they are making those opportunities available to everyone, regardless of their skills and where they live. So I think a lot of work's been done in lots of areas to make sure those jobs are offer a good wage, decent living wage, that they've got opportunities for progression, that they are targeting communities, particularly those with the greatest disadvantage, and taking proper account of equalities and legislation in its broadest form. So I think that's one example of how organisations can really ensure that that they're allowing those benefits to flow down into communities. Because if you simply just advertise jobs hoping that people will apply for them, regardless of where they are, then that it doesn't. There's been lots of evidence to show that doesn't necessarily happen. You've really got to work hard to make sure that people have the chance to apply for those jobs and don't feel put off by whatever application process that you've got. And I think that's been the real value of the work that's happened in Birmingham. And I think that could be applied anywhere in what they've done in realising that if they want to get to ensure that the people on the lowest incomes have got opportunities to jobs, then they've got to really go to where they live, and they've really got to think differently about recruitment longer term. And I think that's particularly important given the recruitment crises that we have, particularly in health and social care. So I think that would be the one kind of really tangible application of it. And the other example would be in terms of planning. So I know that planning is a power that councils have got more recently in Northern Ireland. But again, I think there are real opportunities to use that, to use planning powers to think about how you can really deliver community and planning gain for the longer term. So hopefully that's useful.
Yeah, I'm also mindful in terms of the motion. The motion is is about community wealth building, and although dare I say the Instrument District Council doesn't have a remit for housing, there is some things that is within its control. So when we look at even community wealth building, we have skills and employability. So then that's maybe our local market, or our partnership, our local market partnership, and our skills departments within council, and how we kind of shape that and be imaginative around that there. Yet, yes, maybe the council doesn't have control in terms of financial or economic levers, but there's other elements in terms of social enterprise, which council does have a remit. In terms of procurement, Colin already touched upon it at a national level. There's been changes made there. The council could be looking within their own internal processes, how they procure locally, and also even within the whole community wealth building in terms of that community asset transfer. I think previously Derry City Council had a community asset transfer policy, but the new council doesn't. But when you think about the Foyle Valley Railway Museum, now there's an example of a council asset that was provided to a community organisation, and the community organisation has exploded and been able to lever in financial money and finance to be able to kind of make it an asset. So there is some things that, yes, councils maybe within England and Wales and Scotland have within their power that maybe councils here in NI don't. But there's definitely stuff within councils' remit that they could be looking at in terms of the whole community wealth building approach.
Yeah, I think councils in Northern Ireland, yes, they don't have the same remit. They don't have housing. But I think the example Sarah gave was more just what can be done. I think there are opportunities there to think innovatively. Easy for me to say, and I think it's just something that we need to think more. The councils from the RPA in 2015 do have the remit for social enterprise, women's enterprise, and youth enterprise, as well as planning, and I think that does give them a great kudos and place to make innovative decisions around the likes of social enterprise and how can we engage more with social enterprises, community wealth building, how can we bring social value through into our procurement, even though the PPNs don't apply to local government. But I think there are ways and means, and I think there's just a great opportunity. This sector, social enterprise sector, which includes cooperatives, credit unions, CICs, community wealth building, it's on the move. It's a movement now. It's not just something that sits in a corner. This is getting more and more traction. I think it would be interesting for the likes of Derry City and Strabane Council to actually grasp this and take it to the next level and really encompass how you can support social enterprise, community wealth building as much as you can. Not to say that you're not doing that already, but I just think there's an opportunity from all councils to pick it up.
Thank you very much. Councillor McGowan.
Thanks, Chair. I want to first say, listen, it was two really good presentations. I want to make a couple of observations, and then Colin and Sarah and Brian, if you can maybe try to answer some of the queries I have. I think it's fair to say that social enterprise hasn't really been a priority for the Department of Enterprise or economy for a long time. I remember in 2012 when SENI set up, I thought, here we go, we're going to maybe get on a par with the 26 counties or Wales and Scotland, but it didn't really take traction within that department. That's just an observation that I had, and it found itself maybe coming onto the remit for Department of Communities, really adopted rather than onto the remit more than anything else. And I know the work column done with Department for Finance. I know I took part in a few of those workshops, but this motion was brought by Emmett Duffy, and I don't think anybody in this chat today is against trying to do more of this in the Northwest. We pride ourselves in having been the centre of the social enterprise revolution here in the North. You know, Paddy Bogside, Glennie Bar, many more were doing this 30, 40 years ago. It sort of grew a lot in the community. But we're not there. I mean, one of the questions is, how can we be the number one? There is a definite, I agree with you, Colin, the amount of young people now that are looking to grow and start a business with a social conscience. It's not just about money. It's not just a COVID thing. Younger people are more alert. Anti-corporations, anti-profit, wouldn't say anti-profit, but they want to put the profits back on. They want to do something, not just for themselves and for the community. So what are we missing is one question. Now, do bear in mind that it's at the centre. It's one of the main objectives of our growth plan that we have in the council. I know it's well right on there. So hopefully after days you go and have a look at that, because we need help. We really want Derry to be the number one. We want to win that award the next time, Colin, because we haven't come close since then. So that's really what can we do. I mean, I know Wales and Scotland are ahead of us, but I think they definitely had buy-in there from their Department for Economies. We didn't. It's clear that the Department of Economy didn't see this as a jobs driver, but in Derry we know there's hundreds, maybe thousands of people employed in this sector. So we want to do more of this. So we have it in our growth plan. There's clearly members here today and members across the council want to do this. How do we take it from here? Now, one other thing, bear in mind, we did talk to the university a couple of years ago. We were keen to get a master's programme on social enterprise developed and run at McGee. We were trying to do things a wee bit different there. We thought, we don't want to take stuff out of the uni that's somewhere else. We want that running in the city, so people come from all over Ireland to Derry to do a master's or a postgrad. That's something I think, as a council we should promote. So it's over to you, Colin and Sarah. What can we do? We have it on our strategic growth plan. How do we become the number one council for social enterprise and community wealth building?
Sorry, sir, I just nip in. You meant, I don't know if this is being minute or not, so it probably is. So I won't say an awful lot. Department for Economy, they probably haven't been as supportive as they could be. Would that be the right way of saying it? Social enterprise, being businesses, sits within economy, which I think is probably the right place for it to be, but there is an overlap with communities. There's no doubt about that. And Department for Communities, we have a very good relationship with as well. How can you drive social enterprises forward? Probably just picking up the mantle. I would say pick up the mantle and lead by example. There's a feeling out there that social enterprises do all the sort of soft stuff, but there are some manufacturing companies, there's taxi firms, there's products, and it's how you guys can get them onto your supply chains. Whenever you're looking to run events, bring in social enterprises to provide the goods and services to help run those events, get them onto your supply chains. Amanda looks after our members. I'm going to throw one at her here just to see if she's anything she wants to add.
Yeah, no, that's right. And sometimes, people think that social enterprise is sort of something I suppose, fluffy over here that's done for a nice reason. And yes, the profits are used to help that social mission, but the business can pretty much be anything. And, you know, Derry and Strabane Council, or Derry itself, in terms of actually being a city and a, you know, fantastic location, do a lot of things really, really well, you know, but there's bound to be gaps there in terms of what businesses could be implemented there and be run as a social enterprise, or may already be doing that anyway. But how can the council then, I suppose, going back to that gatekeeper point, how can they engage with those organisations better? How can they use their public purse to grow the capacity of those social enterprise, who then by default will do the community wellbeing through their social mission out in the local community? Is that okay?
Do you want me to come in there briefly as well?
Yeah.
So I think for me, what you're, well, first of all, I mean, thanks for the question. I think that is, you know, I think it's a really great ambition for Derry City and Strabane to be at the leading edge of this, and it's fantastic that that's in your strategic growth plan as well. And I do share the frustration that this isn't seen necessarily as kind of mainstream economic activity, and I don't think Northern Ireland or Derry City and Strabane is unique in that by any sense of the words. I've heard that from frustration from councils across the UK and other parts of Ireland. So I think you're not alone in that, I guess, is the point to say. And what you're trying to do here was change its scale, and change its scale is definitely helped if you can get the support from the Assembly, from the Department of the Economy. And I think we've had a lot of discussions with the Department of Communities about community wealth building, and one of the recommendations we've made to the new advisory group that's been set up on community wealth building within the Department of Communities is that this needs to be a cross-departmental agenda. That what we're talking about here in terms of community wealth building is fundamental for the future of the economy. So it needs to be part of that conversation. So that's something that we've told the advisory group will be our view on that, because where we've seen it work elsewhere in the UK and other parts of the world, it's been at the centre of the conversation about the economy, rather than seen as something that's on the edge. And then in terms of a sort of more practical point about how you kind of drive that in Derry City and Strabane, well, I think we've talked about a bit about procurement, about commissioning, and I think, you know, just like any other growth sector, if you were looking at any other growth sector of your economy, you would say, well, there are ways in which the public sector can help make the market, if you like, can help deliver and drive demand. So I guess there's a challenge there to see, well, what can the council do through your own procurement activity to really support and encourage and build that market going forward, and build that sector as part of your strategic growth plan, using your own commissioning and your own, not only in terms of procurement, but also in terms of your planning and on the powers that you do have. How can you really use that to deliver benefit? And, you know, one of the most obvious ways is through kind of the foundational sector, those kind of those jobs that are absolutely, those services and jobs that are absolutely essential to running an economy, no matter where you are in the world, and Derry City and Strabane will have those jobs too. So I think there's a real opportunity to use that collective public investment that you have in this area through the City Council, but also through the other anchor organisations in the city, like the university and the hospital, but also through some of the new funding that's coming on board, like the city growth deal, to really think about how you can use that to drive, to really focus that on being, you know, becoming that number one place for social enterprise.
And if I can pick up on Sarah's point, I think Sarah mentioned scale. So some of those organisations we shared, and even some of the organisations that we didn't share, they're at a certain level, and they have been a certain level for a considerable period of time. So scale is maybe taking them to double their size or triple their size. And I do think procurement, which is within the control of the council, can be a real economic regenerator if it's used in the correct way. And I know across different projects locally, there has been social clauses and stuff like that there for young people and maybe people from that area and stuff. But I suppose we can be a wee bit more innovative, because sometimes those social clauses are just a wee bit too short-termism. So I think definitely if we're serious about taking it to a different level, because some of the other things we can work on and we can kind of trundle along, we can make inroads, but if we're looking to go scale, procurement is definitely something that I would consider looking at firstly.
Yeah, and if I could just nip in, think there is a perception that social enterprise sits at the edge of the economy, and I mentioned earlier the Westminster All-Party Group, and that was one of their outcomes as well. That social enterprise in England isn't at the heart of the economy, whereas in Scotland and Wales it certainly would be. Our challenge is to get it driven more centrally in Northern Ireland, and in central government we're part of the Social Economy Policy Group, which is a representative from each government department. And to Sarah's point, this needs to be driven cross-departmental, which is one of the reasons that on our strategy we are looking for the cross-departmental support for the sector for Northern Ireland. So filtering it down into Derry City and Strabane, it was great to see last year, I believe it was, Northwest Regional College actually grasping social enterprise and actually using it to showcase to young people to get involved. And some of them spent time and work experience with social enterprises. I think that's important that you continue to drive that and you continue to, but the capacity building as well, to Brian's point, social enterprises, we have a lot of money, a lot of effort put to start them up and to get them going, but it's take them to the next level, and it's sort of make sure that you still, whenever you're looking at economic programs, make sure you consider social enterprises in that. Social enterprises, they can be businesses like other businesses, but let's include them and let's make sure that they're not sitting on the periphery, but they're actually at the heart of local council policy going forward.
Very much. Councillor Harkin.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to everybody for their presentations. They were very interesting, and thank you to Councillor Emmett Doyle as well for the motion that actually allows us to have this discussion, because I think it's a useful one. And I think I've got 3 points that maybe if you want to address out of kind of reading about this, and also kind of based on what you were saying there today, and some in response to some of my colleagues as well. But look, the reason why there's a lot of interest in community wealth building is because of the failure of capitalism. That's why people are looking at different economic alternatives. That's at the heart of the Preston model, which is not the only one that we're being asked to look at, but it's certainly about socialists saying capitalism's not working for the vast majority of people. We need to have an alternative model because communities are being absolutely crushed. And it's about the failure of central government because this is about local council resistance to what central government is doing. And there's a limit in what local councils can do in terms of being an island against government that encourages inequality. And that's why that's where this has come from. And I think that's why it's an international phenomenon. We're talking about it here now in our local council, but this is and I think in the context that we're in now of what's been revealed about capitalism through the pandemic, capitalism in this cost of living crisis, it's only going to drive interest in economic alternatives even more. So this people talk about community wealth building as a form of municipal socialism, and I think we just have to be blunt. That's what this is about. It's about saying the way that central government have run things isn't working for the vast majority of people, and we need a spread. We need more equality, and it's about trying to use whatever levers that council has to increase equality locally. So look, there's a lot of talk about empowering communities, about worker-owned enterprises, about community banks. I think that it's all about challenging the fact that there's growing inequality, and that's at the heart of this. So that's one thing if you can get your response to. And then it's about here, right? I mean, look, I know people have tried to do a lot of good work, but I think when I look at Stormont's policies over the last 20 years have actually created a more unequal society. That's what happens when you privatize healthcare, when you privatize housing, when you attempt to privatize public transportation, when you vote through cuts year in, year out for workers' wages, when you can't lobby for tax cuts for big corporations. That's the economic model that the Tories have, obviously, but it's also been imitated, and I would say by Stormont, which has actually created these problems, which then creates the problems in local council areas. So I think that not only do we need to try things locally around procurement and things like that and experiment, but there also needs to be a challenge to that economic model that has prioritized privatization and wealth taken and extraction for the richest, which means now that we have more millionaires and wealthy people than ever before in the north. But we all know that there's increasing inequality, and that's the problem, in the sense that there can be investment, but where does that investment end up going? And a lot of it right now is traveling up, so that's only become more apparent with this cost of living crisis. So then my third point is about Derry and Strabane district. I mean, pre-pandemic, and I'm sure people know about this because we keep talking about it, but to have 30% of people living below the poverty line is a disgrace. And I think that now, unfortunately, it's actually risen. And I think that those are policies that are obviously driven on a kind of by the British government, but then I don't think that there's been enough protection for people here from Stormont. But when it comes to social enterprise, I think we have to look at like what have we succeeded in being able to do with social enterprise in terms of turning back and pushing back against them big massive waves of inequality, because if we have quite a bit of social inequality, I understand, or social enterprise, but it doesn't, and it probably doesn't get the support that it needs out of Stormont. In fact, it probably doesn't get a lot of help at all. But in terms of more inequality, where can we show that we've actually produced more equality? Because when I say 30% of people living in our district living below the poverty line, too many children living in poverty, because we don't want to be in a situation where we're just rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. And I think for a lot of people right now, that's how it feels, because the people who are actually making the decisions about what happens to the economy, it's trickling down in a disastrous way in the our council areas. So look, I'm supportive of anything that is going to reduce inequality, reduce hardship, or trying to challenge it and finding ways of doing that. But I just think we have to be honest as well about some of the what we are actually looking at right now. I think is not great, and that's despite the efforts that people are putting in with alternative models. Thank you, folks.
Shall I go first, and then others can come in? So thanks again for the comment, and absolutely agree with what you've said, and I guess share your frustration, and I mean, as I said in my piece, this is really about, I think we all share that sort of sense of frustration at the way in which the current economic model, capitalism, isn't working. And in many cases is kind of making things worse for people. And it's not the fact that it doesn't trickle down. It doesn't come down at all. And in fact, more of the money actually gets sucked back up than actually, it finds its way into improving people's lives. So I absolutely share that frustration. And I think, and I do share your sense of, the scale of change that's needed. But having said, I think we have to kind of, I guess there's a real tendency to think, well, what's the point doing anything really, And I think that, whilst there are no panaceas in this world, we have to really continue to work as hard as we can to try and find alternatives. And I think that's what, the big lesson from what Preston did. They were faced with a huge challenge, and this massive investment that was just simply walking away from their city. And at that point, they could have been like, well, what's the point trying to do anything, And they were like, no, let's try and do something. And it's been a long process for them. But I think they're coming out the other end of it, and they are seeing some tangible improvements. And I know that Preston be the first to say there's lots more to do there. There's lots more work, but at least we're now starting to see that the changes on it. And I think one of the things I'd say about community wealth building is that there is a lot of talk sometimes about the processes, and about the kind of particularly procurement and commissioning. Can we get the processes right? And I think that's important. But actually, we have to think it much more broadly. That this isn't just about changing procurement or changing how we do and make a particular process. It is about a fundamentally different way of thinking about and understanding how our economy works, and also about asking much more fundamental questions about who is actually benefiting from what we think we are doing in this area. When it comes to investment, when we say, oh, well, the new investment's coming into this place, great. Who's actually going to get those jobs? Who's actually going to see the benefits in their own lives as a result of what is happening? So I think that on that first point, I absolutely agree with you. But I think it is less about the processes, although that's part of it, and more about the big picture, fundamentally thinking differently about our economy and how people benefit from that economic process. On the second point about Stormont's failure, if you like, and about the failure of central government. Well, that is something, there is inevitably with devolution, there's a tendency perhaps to replicate some of the issues that we see at central government, particularly. I mean, it's not really, it's the Treasury, the Treasury model that we see replicated through policy. But the great thing about having devolution in Northern Ireland that, you don't have in England, like the devolution powers that you've got here, although flawed, if you compare it to what they've got, say, in Greater Manchester or in other parts of England that have some devolution, it's nowhere near on the same level. So I mean, a lot of what I see in the north of England is people are just completely exposed. They have no protection from the Treasury or from Westminster at all. At least you've got Stormont. I know it's not perfect. I know it's a bit of hiatus at the minute, but at least you've got it. And that is a way of trying to shield people in some way. Now, you could argue they've not done that very effectively, but you've still got it. And I would sort of urge you to say, I know it's not perfect. I know there are problems with it, but there are ways of making that work in a way that could be effective in terms of shielding people from the worst excesses of the kind of government approach that we've got at the minute. And I think as well, there's an opportunity for Northern Ireland to think like Wales and Scotland have. So Wales have now got a really different way of thinking about their economy. So they've adopted the foundational economy as what they want to think about in terms of their economic strategy going forward. In Scotland, they've adopted the well-being economy as a way of thinking about their economy. So I think there's an opportunity for Northern Ireland to think, well, how would we want to see the economy? Because there has been a really strong emphasis in Northern Ireland on inward investment. Inward investment is going to solve all our problems. And of course, it hasn't at all, and it isn't going to. You can't rely solely on inward investment to sort all your problems out. So I think there's a real opportunity for Northern Ireland to think, well, what could we learn from Wales and Scotland, and how would we like to think about our economy going forward in a kind of more progressive and in an alternative way, if you like, rather than just simply the form of capitalism that we see at Westminster. And then the third thing on social enterprise, on what your challenge about what has changed as a result of social enterprise. Well, I think that comes back to the conversation we were having about change at scale, and how we can ensure that social enterprise, in whatever form it takes, it could be cooperatives, it could be worker ownership. There are lots of different models out there, and I think making sure that we're looking at that at scale, and thinking about how we can use the levers at our disposal to try and deliver that. Because I think that's one of the it's definitely an alternative, and it's definitely worth looking at. But I agree there's more to do and think about how we really make the most of that opportunity in an area like Derry City and Strabane. So hope that's useful.
Yeah, and suppose just to come in on the back of that, rather than probably Sean go through your individual questions, but to share a sense there's frustration there, and I have to say that we shared the same frustration, and it's one of the reasons that we're pushing and we've started the process for a strategy. We believe that through COVID, there was a lack of understanding of the social enterprise sector at Department for Economy. And we see that as being a bit of a stumbling block, and it hasn't helped in flowing. The Department for Economy, if you look at what InvestNI has been tasked to do, InvestNI has been focused purely on FDI and IT, and much to I believe the detriment of the local economy and the local, particularly obviously I would say the social enterprise sector. That's why we're very keen that the strategy is developed, that the strategy enjoys cross-departmental support, that every department understands the benefits that social enterprise can bring and actually uses that power to bring to the fore. We're reforming the all-party group next week to get the all-party members together. We will be having, it's just an AGM at this stage, but it's to get it up and running again, because we see that as a means of getting support at Stormont. And we also, meeting with the minister, but that has been a challenge, I would have to say, over recent years. But who knows, things might work out differently going forward with whoever takes up that position as minister. But we just think that the awareness piece needs to be cross-departmental, cross-party, and once we get everybody pushing in the same direction, I think it will help the flow of investment down to the local communities and through local councils. But it has been a challenge and it is frustrating. But it's something that we're very passionate and we believe about this, the impact of this economy and the impact of what social enterprise can do. So we're very keen to see it grow. Right at all levels, from central government down into local government.
And can I just come on the back of Colin there? Sean, thanks for your point. My thing during COVID was, towards the end of COVID, was people was talking about returning to normal. And my thing was, no, that's not return to normal, because normal's not working. So I'm excited to see where these community wealth building conversations will go in terms of our local economy as a citizen of the city and somebody that loves and works with these organisations day on daily. And it was shocking to hear the levels of poverty that are right across Derry and Strabane. So we need something of scale. We need something that's innovative. We need something that's different. So I'll be interested to see where these conversations, and I'm delighted to be part of this first conversation today.
Thank you very much. Alderman Hussey.
Thank you for the opportunity, Chair. I'm not a member of the committee, as you know. Sarah, Colin, Brian, thanks very much for the presentations. Sarah, I'm going to disagree with you on one thing. You said capitalism is not working. Capitalism isn't working as it should do. I think it might be a better way of putting it, because the profits, to my mind, there should be a reinvestment in the business, in the local area, and thereby in the community. So, capitalism is there to make a profit. A lot of our businesses are SMEs. I noted in the examples that you were given, they're all urban. I'm a rural councillor. I would hope that you can, when you're responding, outline some of the rural social enterprise that I'm aware of, and I would hope that you're aware of as well. Sarah, in your presentation, you talked about community wealth, and that's where we should be at, talking about community wealth and talking about the economic mix that produces that community wealth. And therein, I would see social enterprise as augmenting that economic mix. And I think one of the issues that some people have with social enterprise is the issue of displacement. And I think that is something that has to, if not the actuality, the perception of displacement. So that has to be addressed. Colin, you talked about the education sector. It's 25 years since I was teaching. And one of the things that I, of course, would have considered is the syllabi of the business classes that I was teaching up until 98. And we did look at social enterprises. I suppose we didn't have that terminology. We talked about co-ops, whether it was workers' co-ops, farmers' co-ops, etc. And indeed, within my coursework, it was a social enterprise type scenario that I would have developed with the students that I was working at the time. So it was there, but obviously social enterprise has developed well beyond that understanding of it back then. And I accept your point that is something that the Education Authority and the syllabus producers have to acknowledge and take forward. It's a reality within the society that we find ourselves in, and that reality has to be addressed and indeed encouraged. But as I say, as an augment to the overall economic mix. I was particularly interested in the Lewis example because the first line in that was working with local business. And I think that that's an important element, that the social element can work with local business. And indeed, I agree, we need to overcome the issue on procurement, etc. PPN, as you rightly highlighted there, it doesn't apply to LAs at the moment, and it should do. The issue of social clauses, I know in the Legacy Strabane Council, this was a major concern for us, the social clause issue in our own procurements and the social value that can emanate from utilising the social clause in our procurement policies. So all of those things going forward need to be addressed. I'm trying to think of the other exemplar, and quite rightly, I think it was you, Sarah, who said that they are bespoke local solutions. You didn't say it in that terminology, but that is actually what they are. So I think it is good that conversations are being opened and that we can look at the local scenario and look at how the bespoke local solutions can be developed, not just for the urban area, not just for the city, but for the entirety of the district that we are privileged to represent. But thank you for your presentations. Thank you.
Shall I just come in there and then start off? Yeah, well, thanks for those comments, Derek. I think when I think about the failures of capitalism, I think the fact that the growth, the outcome that traditional economics seeks tends to be framed around the idea of economic growth. So economists tend to think that what we need to do is just have a big pie called economic growth. Let's grow the pie as much as we can, and then slowly but surely everybody will benefit from that growth pie. And I think the problem is that it doesn't work because there are lots of interests out there, which mean that the pie gets eaten up before everybody has a chance to share in it. So I think for me, it's about being clear about what outcomes we are trying to achieve from our economy. And that the outcomes that we want to see is that people actually start to benefit from how our economy operates. So I think that's the way I tend to look at it, that this is about how we think about our economy differently, that it should be an economy which really delivers for everybody and not just a few. And I think your point, I don't know whether the point about rural was for me or not, but certainly there are lots of examples out there. I mentioned Lewis. Lewis is very much a much more rural area. And the other place that we've done a lot of work on is in the south of Scotland, and very rural area, and they are looking at how they can use a community wealth building approach to support retrofit in public buildings, but also in with housing associations with housing. And we've also
Sorry, sir.
Yeah.
Sorry, sir. I accept what you're saying are to the examples that were used in the presentation, but I'm talking about the local examples that went up were urban social enterprises.
Oh, okay.
I suppose just to kind of, because Sarah wouldn't know the local examples, so there's examples that we didn't pick based in rural or what DEA they were in, it was just a snapshot. So we do, and we work right across ourselves with Solis Centre and the Diamond Centre and Rapid and Castledare Healthy Living Centre. So there's lots of urban, rural social enterprises working right across the 8 DEAs in the district and city.
Sorry, through you, Chair, I accept that, Brian, but weren't there on the screen. But then I suppose Gary, I think it was, or somebody else said, "But where's the one that I'm looking at?" You know, okay. Rathmore, I think.
Okay, thanks very much. Moving on now to Councillor Cusack.
Thank you, Chair, and Sarah, Colin, Amanda, and Brian. On behalf of the SDLP, I'd like to thank you all for taking the time to come and present to us today. It's been really interesting to hear about your work, your ethos, your ambitions, and all towards creating community wealth. Now, the problem with being at this stage of discussions is that most of the questions and most of the issues have been covered, so I don't want to be duplicating or reiterating what everybody else has said and what yourselves have answered. But, you know, obviously, with the times we're living in, every penny counts, and particularly keeping the flow of money and opportunities within our local communities will contribute massively to that, which you've already outlined. And I do believe social enterprise can also be the catalyst to realising bigger ambitions and projects. So it can start something, can start the ball rolling with bigger, larger, more ambitious plans, definitely. And especially with the young people involved and getting them involved in business and thinking in a business capacity at a younger age gives them the confidence maybe to follow ideas and dreams that they have, you know, as they get older and as their skill sets develop. I do believe that we as a council have a really large role to play in promoting and progressing social enterprise as an economic strategy. And have you already said, and you've already covered everything I was going to say, I do believe that officers and the council should be encouraging, and I do know they do encourage economic inward investment, and you know, we're maximising the potential for SMEs. But I think we have sort of missed a trick quite often in the past with, you know, when it comes to, you know, the procurement and employing local businesses and, you know, businesses and contractors. So keeping things local is something we have missed out on, trying to maybe get an economic advantage by using, you know, some organisations or businesses outside of our council area and district, because it would save a few pounds. Where realistically, by using somebody local, we're putting that back into, you know, what people here can spend and can put back into the local economy and create jobs and that. So there's a bigger picture there. But it is encouraging to see the social enterprise projects build and grow here, and we would be ambitious for that. So as I said before, I'm not going to go over and duplicate what has been already covered. There's a lot of food for thought, and as you have already said, there's a lot of areas for improvement, and I hope the council and ourselves can work proactively with you going forward on that. Thank you.
Sean, if I could just come in and say thank you very much for those comments. Obviously, yes, supply chains is important, and councils, you know, can start including social enterprises on their supply chains and keeping that local. The one thing I would just highlight is we're going to launch in the next month or two social enterprise place. Now, it's done across the UK. We're going to do it by council district, so we're going to be looking for applications from each council against certain criteria. And at our annual awards on the 14th of October, we're going to be announcing the first social enterprise places in Northern Ireland. So obviously we'll be talking to the champions about that, but for the work that's going on in Derry City and Strabane, I think very worthy applicant in that regard. So we'll be putting that down through the social enterprise champions and asking them to share and to consider putting an application in to be recognised as a social enterprise place in Northern Ireland.
And just to say from me, and thanks very much for the comments, and I agree, and Derek said it as well. I think this is about kind of working with business and the wider supply chain, and particularly making sure that we're supporting businesses that are developing and growing within this area. So it's definitely part of the conversation.
That's great, thank you. And Councillor Doyle.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to everybody for coming on and giving a presentation. I was glad to bring this motion forward because I do think that we have an opportunity to, as Sarah said, develop an economic policy for the city that is different, because Stormont doesn't work. Certainly is the beginning of a conversation. I'm wondering if one of the officers, yes, I must have already said it. The motion also included Preston City Council because it was really key to particular their model. But one of the things do you think would be helpful, if, particularly from Sarah's point of view, is
breaking up there, Emmett.
Yeah, it was just a bad connection.
The time.
I don't know if yourselves want to respond to what you might have heard so far, or else I can give Emmett maybe just a wee minute, even just to see if he can sort of disconnect and come back in again.
I wasn't able, Chair, to pick up anything of that. Unfortunately, it was.
No problem. Have you got a sorted, Councillor Doyle? No. Do you want to try and log out, Councillor Doyle, and try and log straight back in to see if that would help?
Is this any better, Chair?
Yep, can hear you perfectly. If the
Yep, perfect. No, just very quickly, did we have a response back from Preston City Council? For Sarah, if we wanted to go down the route of the Preston model, what would her advice be for us to do next? Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, and thanks for bringing the motion as well. It's been really good to be part of this conversation this afternoon. We work with Preston. I mean, I know Matthew Brown at Preston, and we continue to work with Preston. So I think they certainly started their community wealth building journey by looking at procurement. So we worked with them to map their local government, their local city council spend. So we looked at their top 300 suppliers and mapped where those suppliers were in the city, and then looking at how money was flowing within the city and what more the council could do to increase the flow of wealth through the existing investment that the council was making through goods and services. So that's where they started their journey. I don't know what Matthew would say in terms of what his reflections on that process would be. But as I say, they are now looking very much at how they grow their social economy, and looking at the role of worker ownership and cooperatives. I know that's something that's very close to Matthew Brown's heart at the moment. I know he's doing a lot of work on that. We have published a lot of information on the website, so if it would be helpful, I could certainly forward on some of those documents, and they help tell the story of Preston and what they've done, how they started and where they've gone to since. So, and I'd be happy to follow up with any other information that would be useful.
Can I come on there, Chair? Also as well, on top of that there, in terms of community wealth building, I have another role. I'm a director of Development Trust Northern Ireland, and they have a community wealth building programme funded by DFC. So I think they are going to approach their city and Strabane District Council in terms of development of a community wealth building hub for the council area. So that might be, I suppose, might lead to further activities and further conversations. So maybe that's something in terms of Development Trust Northern Ireland, following up that conversation.
Just finally, sorry, Chair, just a final point to make. We've just put together a briefing paper for new councillors on community wealth building, so I'd be happy to share a copy of that if that would be useful. And we're also doing a briefing event, an online webinar kind of briefing event on it, and I can share details of that as well if that would be useful.
Thanks very much. I don't know if you have any of the aldermen or councillors on this committee. I've noticed that Councillor Doyle cannot officially propose on this committee as he's not a member. So if any other councillor would like to have a read at what Councillor Doyle has proposed in the chat box and propose it themselves, they can do so. Okay, proposed by Councillor McGowan. Can we have a seconder, please? Seconded by Councillor Harkin. Thank you very much. Okay, is any other speakers or anybody any other questions? No. Okay. Well, look, to yourself, Sarah, Colin, Amanda, and Brian, thank you all very much for taking the time of your day to come on to present your presentation just today. Very informative meeting indeed, and a lot of food for thought to take away from. And to help build for the future. So look, I wish you all the best and thank you very much. And at that, Stephen, I'll also bring the meeting to a close. Thanks very much, members, for attending. Thank you all.
Thank you,
Chair.
Thanks very
Thank you,
much.
everybody. Thank you.